We invited you all here to give you more information about the last phase of the Master of Charm EU, which is the Capstone phase, and to also let you know of the opportunities for stakeholders for your involvement if you're interested. So before we begin, I would like to say that the first half an hour of the meeting will be recorded. So if you would like to be presented, then you can just keep your cameras on, but if not, please turn them off. And we can, of course, keep track of the chat for questions that will be answered in the next half of the hour, so the last 30 minutes. So with that, I will just press the recording button now, and let me find it. Oh, it's already started.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. I would also like to briefly share the agenda with you, so I will put it in the chat as well. So first of all, we're going to have a presentation from Marianneke Feige, who is the coordinator of the Capstone phase and assistant professor at the Copernicus Institute of Sustainable Development here in Utrecht, at the University of Utrecht. So Marianneke will be explaining more regarding the Capstone, what is this phase of the Master and the role of the stakeholders in it. And the next presentation will be given by Roger Engelberts. Hi, Roger, I see you're here. Hi, who is a creative entrepreneur, director, and owner of Imagro, and he will share his own experience from participating as a stakeholder in a similar program. So with that said, I will just give the floor to Marianneke. Thanks.
Thank you, Dimitra. And thanks also for our team to join. I see there's quite a number of us here. I will share my screen in a minute, Roger, so then after you can come. Yeah, thanks and welcome everyone. I see that we have participants from, well, societal actors, so external stakeholders as we call it, businesses, civil society, government agencies. So those are the ones that we call external stakeholders. So this session is specifically meant for that. But I also see that we have many of our colleagues here, university staff. So I'll also tell a bit about how university staff can get involved in this capstone. So let me just share my screen and then start. I also see that there is a number of you who are already involved in Charm.eu, so you might know already what Charm.eu is. But basically Charm.eu is an European University Alliance, 5 university partners at the moment. 3 are being added in the next phase of Charm.eu. But at the moment we're working together with Barcelona, Trinity College Dublin, Utrecht University, University of Montpellier, and Eötvös Loránd University Budapest. The capstone that we are discussing today is part of the Masters in Global Challenges for Sustainability. So we have 3 phases in the Masters. At the moment, there are 70 students in all of the 5 universities. So we have a hybrid education. So all the students in the 5 universities are following the same modules, the same phases, in these 5 universities with on-location teaching as well. The whole concept of the Masters is really challenge-based. So the students, it's student-led. So the students are in charge also of defining their own challenges, connecting to extra academic actors. So it's a very inter and transdisciplinary master. So as you see, the first phase is really preparatory phase, with modules on social innovation, research, transdisciplinary research, and sustainability. Currently, students are following the flexible phase with the themes life and health, water, and food. And the idea is then that they take their knowledge onto the capstone, the final phase, which is starting in September for a period of 6 months. It's a 30-credit module. So in their master's, student can follow different sort of trajectories, and they're quite, as I said, it's student-led, so they're quite in charge of their own even assessments in some cases, but also finding their own pathways. So the the capstone is also very much geared toward different sort of skill developments and also enabling students to find their own career path and to make their own choices. As I said, the master's is really focused on a challenge-based learning, which means that students are actively engaged in acquiring knowledge, applying, developing their skills, and this is being co-developed among transdisciplinary, stakeholders, external stakeholders, but also academics. So the idea, and this is also a call for you to get engaged if you want, is that external stakeholders are also thinking along about what kind of skills do students actually need to gain in order to be good sort of future in their future careers and good sort of employees in the future. So on to the capstone. So the capstone is, as I said, a 6-month sort of thesis project. Students will work together in teams of 4 to 6 students. So that means we would have roughly 15 teams divided across the 5 universities. So in an ideal case scenario, we would have 3 teams per university, but that might vary a bit depending also on the challenges that we find in each of the locations, but also on the student preferences. So in the capstone, students and extra academic actors, so societal actors, collaborate on what we call a real-life sustainability challenge. So they co-define, analyze, and evaluate and address the challenges. So that is together with stakeholders, but also together with their academic supervisors. They are in charge mostly of the challenge. Of course, the challenge would be submitted by external actors. So it would be really something that is useful also to societal actors to address a challenge. But students are also in the lead of further defining the challenge and defining together with the stakeholders what is the final capstone product, which can be a variety of products, as I will show later on. So the idea is that students will learn by doing. There is also a set of workshops that we will organize to further develop the skills of students. And this will be, of course, based on the knowledge that they gained in phase 1 and phase 2, but also sort of just-in-time delivery of skills. So as they go, they will need certain skills, for example, in analyzing data or in gathering data or in developing business models, etc. So these kind of skills will be taught in the workshops. And eventually, this phase is really about synthesizing prior learning, refine professional skills, build networks as well, of course, among academics and non-academics, and prepare for their future careers. So this is sort of the table. So the student team is in the middle. We have the main stakeholder, the client. I will tell a bit more about that in a minute. Academic supervisors from one of the 5 universities, and then other stakeholders can be involved as the challenge develops. So why would you want to get involved in the capstone? Well, first of all, identify solutions or ways to address a sustainability challenge that is very relevant to your work field. Build competences, knowledge and skills amongst yourselves, but also amongst students. Receive useful outputs in the form of capstone products, analyses, business models, communication materials maybe. You could think about testing or using certain technologies, software or tools. Networking, of course, with academics, non-academics, among CharmEU, but also our expanded network. And maybe recruit CharmEU students for later once they have finished their masters. So in terms of stakeholders, the stakeholders that we think about getting involved in the capstone are government agencies, intergovernmental organizations such as UN agencies, NGOs, civil society, but also grassroots social movements and businesses. And we very much value diversity and inclusivity. This is not just a catchphrase, but we have people specifically employed to take this into account and also to integrate that into the module design for the capstone. But also that will be taken into account in selecting the stakeholders as well, where we want to consciously focus on also those stakeholders who are maybe the less sort of usual suspects or the smaller sort of grassroots movements or so. In terms of stakeholder involvement, stakeholders would typically be addressing societal challenges related to the Sustainable Development Goals. But as we all know, Sustainable Development Goals are very broad. So mainly any sustainability challenge would be related to any of the SDGs. They would value trans and interdisciplinary approaches and inclusiveness and share some common vision and some of the CharmU principles. You can see them also on the website, which includes challenge-based learning, student-centered, inclusivity, etc. And willing to invest some time and effort in the capstone. So what we foresee for now is that the main stakeholders, so what we call the client, would be meeting student teams about once a month and provide rounds of feedback on the proposal, presentation, and draft capstone output. So in terms of the challenges, we have a certain number of criteria that we want to present to you, also for you to be able to think about what kind of challenges could you submit for a capstone. So they can be proposed by external stakeholders or CharmU staff. In case of CharmU staff, then we would have to think along about what kind of external stakeholders could be involved. As I said, there's one main actor, the client, who has an interest in the challenge and has some time and commitment to work on the capstone. Capstone challenges are authentic and interdisciplinary. They relate to a societal problem rather than only an individual or organizational problem. They focus on themes covered by the SDGs, as I already mentioned, and ideally they should be focusing on several dimensions of sustainability. So maybe not just economic focus or not just social focus, but across different dimensions such as environment, economic, and social. Ideally, they relate to one or more themes of phase 2. So as I said, phase 2 that students are currently involved in relates to water, food, and life and health. So challenges should focus on some of these aspects so that also enables students to integrate some of their knowledge into the capstone. And focus on inclusivity, so also take account of perspective from marginalized groups. And this is something that we will also ask for students to explicitly take into account, to view the challenge from a diverse perspective. Capstone challenges are linked to the research conducted at least in at least one of the 5 universities, because that also enables us to find academic supervisors who can guide the student teams. And most challenges will be linked to one university. So they have one location where the student team sits, so in one of the 5 countries where the universities are located. But hybrid challenges are possible. So even if a challenge is located mostly outside of Europe, that's possible. We cannot, from CharmU, we cannot fund students to go on fieldwork outside Europe, but sometimes students may choose to, or they might do online interviews, or they might, in some hybrid ways, be still involved in challenges also even outside Europe or outside the 5 European countries that we are working from. Empirical scope, of course, should be large enough to work for a team of 4 to 6 students in 6 months, but still be feasible. I already mentioned the skill development workshops that students build on. And students also need to conduct field work, so that can be interviews or maybe visits to external stakeholders. In some cases, students would need ethical clearance, in which case, of course, we will provide the guidance for that. And at least 4 students need to have an interest in the challenge. So if you decide to submit a challenge or come up with an idea, we cannot guarantee any placement because it also depends on the interests of the students, of course. So it might be that we might get more challenges than we can actually accommodate. And we would also strive for geographically, empirically diverse challenges. In terms of stakeholder activities, what can you expect? Well, one thing is to co-define the challenge. And you can do that also very much at the start. From now on, get in touch with us and discuss any challenge that you would like to work together with students on. so that we can also co-define it together with you and see if it's possible to sort of formulate that into a capstone challenge. Of course, eventually you would then collaborate with students and also with academic supervisors to analyze, evaluate, and address the challenge. Of course, the main work will be done by the students, but you would be able to guide some students in their challenge. You could also provide one-off or longer-term expertise. Even if you don't submit a challenge, you can still become involved if you want to engage with students in terms of interviews, maybe give access to databases, facilitation of field work, for example, or assist students in the communication and outreach of the final product. Stakeholders can also be involved in the assessment, feedback of the capstone proposal. Of course, most of the assessment will be done by us, by academics, but we very much value also the input from stakeholders in terms of the assessment and the feedback on how students are actually performing in terms of identifying and analyzing and addressing the challenge. You could also be involved in giving lectures or workshops for the skill development workshops that I mentioned. And maybe invite students for events, workshops, webinars, etc., also to build that network. So in terms of the capstone products, these are some of the possible products that we foresee, but then of course, again, it depends on the students. They are in charge of their own challenge and products. But these are some of the products that you could think about. So scientific reports, maybe academic articles or analyses, policy briefs, policy recommendations, prototypes, software, etc. So they can be very diverse. And please get in touch with us also in case you have some ideas on what could be ultimately the output from a capstone, and then we can see if that's possible to accommodate. In terms of next steps, and this is one of my last slides, so the procedure for now, if in case you're interested, and this is for external stakeholders, if in case you're interested, you can check the criteria that I just mentioned for the capstone challenges and also the stakeholder types. Define your challenge and also get in touch with us in case you want to discuss your challenge. Find a responsible contact person from your side. So we foresee that there's one person at least who we can be in contact with constantly also during the challenge. You can submit a challenge via submission form. We will make that available after this session. So where you need to answer a couple of questions, and of course we can also help you with that in case you want to submit your challenge. We are planning a World Cafe on 20th of April, where we would like the external stakeholders or any academics also to pitch their challenge to students so that students can see the overview of the challenges that are available to them, and then they can choose. As I said, there's no guarantee of placement because eventually the students will sign up for the challenges, give a list of references, and then we will make a selection based on this. And this again also has to we have to take into account, for example, the allocation of students across the universities. From our side, of course, we will make the submission form available, collect submissions, and also get in touch with you to fine-tune the challenges, and then offer the challenges to the students for selection. We also have a couple of student representatives to help us, and a poll that would identify from the students what are they actually interested in, so that we can proactively get in touch with certain stakeholders in case that's an area that students are very interested in. Of course, we will find academic supervisors for the student teams, and then eventually select the students and form student teams sometime in May. So the World Cafe, as I said, will be on the 20th of April, and then soon afterwards students will have to make their selection, their choices, their list of preferences, after which we will select the students and allocate them among the challenges. And then, of course, the capstone will start in September, so then the real work will start. So get in touch if you want to fine-tune your challenge together with us and later with the students. submit a challenge. But also if you want to think along about the capstone design, skill development workshops, and then for CharmU staff, if you want to become an academic supervisor, we're still looking for supervisors, or become part of the team and think along with us. Yeah, let us know. And I think we will now go to Roger, who will provide an example of a capstone, just to show a bit more sort of concretely what it means to be engaged in a capstone challenge. And then afterwards we can have a Q&A. So any questions you can ask afterwards or put them in the chat so that we can address them. Thanks. And over to you, Roger.
Okay, thank you very much. I will share my screen, I guess. Okay, there we go. My name is Roger Engelbert, and I'm happily to present my experience with challenge-based learning with students in Holland. I'm an entrepreneur behind Imagro. It's my big passion, and I'm also formerly a professor of co-creation entrepreneurship at the Haas University of Applied Science in Den Bosch, in the south of Holland. I will show you some slides. This is visible, isn't it? You see the slide, okay.
Yeah, can you make it big screen, maybe?
I think it is big screen, but it has to be big screen. So what do you see right now?
Now we only see you. Wait, yes, this is better. Thank you.
Okay. Well, last year we had a capstone in the Dutch dairy industry, and we called it Keeping Cows in 2050. It means Holland is, of course, a dairy country, and with windmills and dairy, but we have big challenges in the dairy industry. So keeping cows means also in Dutch loving cows in 2050, because keeping is loving in Holland in Dutch. So, well, I don't see that he doesn't go further. Wait a second. Excuse me. Do you see this? Yes. This, Marianne? Yes. Do you hear me?
Yes.
And you see also the screen?
Yes, it's not a big screen, but anyway, go ahead. It's fine, we can see it.
It is a capstone with a broad alignment. Yeah, I think it's important that it's national. It's national from the national approach is with bigger partners. The government is in it, but also the big agri-food bank, the Rabobank, and other partners. But very important, it was top-down arrested, but we need a bottom-up approach, because then we know that we have a good alignment with the dairy industry, and that's important because also for the trust and the faith for the dairy farmers. But when we look after the big societal challenges of the dairy industry, we see some big problems on this dairy industry, like nitrogen pollution, polarization, climate change, sustainability, globalization, and feeding the world, critical consumers. So what Einstein said was, we cannot solve problems with the same type of thinking that we use the problems. So we need a different approach for this capstone. All these problems, we need a different approach. We need more interdisciplinary focus to bring new solutions. So the students, they had to compete with that. So our shared challenge was keeping cows in 2050, and it's not about innovation, but it's more about innovators, more the entrepreneurship, and starting in the societal and in the market instead of starting from the dairy farmer, his point of view. We need to think out of the box. So we organize a program. It's the double diamond of innovation. First, we have to make it a more broader perspective, divulgation, discover and analyze, and then we go to develop and validate. In 100 days time, the students with the farmer, they working in teams. Every farmer had his own student team and a coach. They have to present on a final platform their solution. So what we did was we used the context of the dairy farmer to well, bring it abroad. So the students also know their context and they know in what kind of working environment they are living. And there were 8.
We still see the first slide. So maybe if you, I don't know if you move on.
I'm sorry. Maybe I have the double. Sorry, Marianneke. There we go. Is this visible for you?
Still the first slide.
Yes. So yes. Now it's moving. Okay, I'm sorry. So this is the world we all live in with all those challenges. And then we are moving to one big challenge, keeping cows in 2050. So it's not about innovation, but about innovators. And this is the double diamond which I told you about, which is the program in 100 days to deliver in the final presentation their solutions. We use their context of the dairy farmers in the pasture, in the meadow, and I think it's important that students were dedicated with a farmer, and they had to know each other because you have to know the context of the dairy farmer by itself and their solutions. There were 8 multidisciplinary teams working on that program with students from university and also from applied science university level. So the students were there. We need a professional in every team. So it's a coach, the coach who is building bridges between the farmer and the students, and who also knows the context of the dairy farm because it's a very typical context. And we need some different perspectives. We have to think out of the box. And you were only earlier talking about inclusiveness. It has to be inclusive. But it was also COVID time, so we had to make it hybrid. So we had the teams were decentral at the dairy farm, and then we could manage that every team still was online. So we had some technique challenges, but it happened it went very well. And you see that it was working together by dairy and nature. In totally 8 teams, 8 results, and these are also the societal challenges like revaluing meat, membrane distillation from manure to hydrogen, etc., etc. So it was very specific, and the farmers were dedicated to bring on solution with the insights of the students. It was fun working with them. At the end, there was a big final, and that was also an event. So we had to work up to an event, and one of those teams was winning the Dutch Dairy Challenge 2021. And I think it's also important that there was quite a competition between the teams. So the teams were working on it in a quite a good dedication. So there was one winner, and in the end, everybody is a winner. But I want to share you also the lessons learned and the keys to success for this capstone and this Dutch Dairy Challenge. At first, I think that context is meaningful. So the fish is probably the last one to discover the water. If you look at the dairy farmers, I think students bring a broader perspective, bring also the city perspective. They bring other insights. I think context is very meaningful. It's a joke, but when you see one hair on your head is less, but one hair in the soup is much. So we need to be to see the context of the dairy farmer and see the bigger picture. And one also important lesson is that we have to go from NIMBY to OYO. Yeah? NIMBY, everybody knows it, I think, like not in my backyard. But when you feel real ownership, it means only if I own it, mentally ownership. When I feel real ownership, also with the students and the teams, then you are dedicated to deliver. So I think the process to engage the teams is very important, and also getting the farmer out of his farm. So you need to bring him in another context. And that's also a nice thing, because one of the 5 innovations to come to an innovation in Blue Ocean is making a new combination. So these farmers, almost all of them, they made new combinations on their farm. And in the end, that means that they are also very innovative. And one other thing is that I think that academic students miss practical experience. They love it to do that, but I think it's important that they have also a deep dive in practical skills. And I think we, as the owners of the capstone, have to address that we don't have to expect too much content from the students. It's important. And we have to go to the second mountain, from ego, me, myself, and I, to eco. What is the next step? Also, Marianne told it already, looking at the Sustainable Development Goals. And my last slide, I think, is this one. What are the keys to success? I think very key is that we start with a societal approach, not a market approach. So in the dairy industry, look at the societal challenges and bring that to the business. 2, I think community is a very nice word. We have to make unity in the community building. And we saw that all those students who were working together was also a new community. They still have contact with each other and focus on connecting people. So the process with energy and inspiration is very important. Then the multidisciplinary teams. We need multidisciplinary teams to make the solutions better and better. And important that we have a starting engine, and that means that are the professional coaches. We need professional coaches who understand, in this case, the dairy sector, the dairy industry, the farmers, which are, a little bit, looking through their own spectacles. So we need to stretch them also with coaches. And then the teams speed up. I told you already about the competition in a pressure cooker. In 100 days they have to deliver. That was good. And clear communication and the process of communication. So every time you have to bring follow-ups, what are the next steps, and manage the expectations on each side of the team. This year we go to a national approach. That's good news. We started last year in a regional approach in the south of Holland, and in 2022 we go to a national approach with a pre-student challenge. So the students bring on their innovation space. They bring that to the dairy farmers, and the dairy farmer can bring it further. That's our approach for this year, and that is my last slide. So I hope I can address the capstone which we worked on last year.
Thank you, Roger. And thank you for the interesting input that you shared with us and your experiences with the capstone that you worked on. I think there are some similar points to what we are about to do with the capstone and Charm EU, as well with maybe the thematics of the challenge. And I'm wondering now that we are at the end of the presentations, whether there are any questions from the audience and from the participants regarding what Roger shared with us. So, you have the opportunity maybe now to ask questions about, how it is to participate as a stakeholder and the interaction with students and academics, as well as the input that Marianne shared about the details of the capstone. Okay, and if there are no questions until now, I see one. Wait, Tom.
Hello, thanks very much for the presentations. I was just wondering, what is the process after the students have completed their research and they kind of maybe come up with a solution? What happens next?
It's a question for me, yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, in fact, we made an event that all the students and the farmers come back in a kind of how to say a comeback day, and the farmer have to deliver what did they do with the output of the students, and that is very good because then you have a kind of it's a kind of a timing. So the students are very curious about what did the farmer do with that, and the farmer has to deliver. So that's, we call it in Dutch a conclave method. So we have to bring it on.
Great. And how do you make sure that is it an agreement at the beginning to say that the farmer has to act on the student research? Is that something you just explained?
Yes. Mentions during the World Cafe. And if you're okay with it, we will just forward the invite to you. Are there any last words? I know, Caroline, Marianne, do you think of some other question? Oh, Roger, I see you.
I'll ask one question. What is for you all the biggest challenge to make this successfully? What is the biggest challenge? Do we have to overcome?
Well, what do you mean successful outcome for the product of the challenge?
Is it to make it more students enthusiastic, or is it more to find the good subjects, or is it to work together? What is the biggest challenge for you all? How do we work together, or what is
for the capstone?
As for the capstone, what is your biggest challenge to make this successfully?
I think for now, the biggest challenge that I see is the match between the supply and the demand, basically. So the supply from external stakeholders in terms of the challenges and the demand from the students, also taking into account, of course, that we would like to more or less equally divide students across the universities. And that was also a challenge in phase 2, where students actually indicated their preferences. Some want to sit in Barcelona because it's nice weather, etc. But it's really sort of about the challenge as well. So it's really the challenge plus the location that matters. So that's what they would opt for, basically. But of course, we can't guarantee that students will have preferences for a challenge that we are very enthusiastic. We can be as enthusiastic as possible about the challenge, and it can be very important. But then if there's no students who want to work on it, then that could be a challenge.
So we also have, with all together, we have to look from the perspective of the students. How do we bring enthusiastic views on their perspective? I think that's very important, that they give the good traction to you all.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and of course, part of this is also, so we have an open call to all actors to submit a challenge, but it's also very much a sort of one-on-one for us to guide stakeholders and academic staff in defining the challenge, or at least defining it broadly, so that they can work together with students to later on really fine-tune the challenge. and then to match that to the expectations that students have with the poll that Caroline mentioned. So it's for us also a sort of guided process rather than just an open call and see whoever comes, but it's really sort of also one-on-one meetings sometimes with people to identify what could be an interesting one and what fits best with master's students' experiences so far. And we, of course, have also a student representative in the Capstone team, so they can think along with us about this.
Okay.
Just perhaps before we close the meeting, I would like to invite you and to encourage you to share, this initiative and the information that we shared within this meeting with any extra academic actor or any academic who would be interested in participating in the CharmEU Capstone. So we will make this information available on the CharmEU website.
Yeah, including the criteria for the challenges, which are quite important for knowing what kind of challenges you can submit. But of course, please get in touch with us to sort of further fine-tune the topic.
Yeah. Well, thank you all. I think we can, maybe Marianne and Caroline, maybe we can stick until the end of the meeting here in this room, but for the rest, please feel free to excuse yourself if you don't have any other questions, and we will be, as previously said, we will be informing you or notifying you with all the information that we shared.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.